Welcome to WPS After Hours podcast, a presentation of the Public Information Office. We take you beyond the headlines to get the story behind the stories on the issues that impact you. In today's episode, we meet Constable Deborah Van Der Ploeg and Trish Cohen, a retired nurse and volunteer for the Victim Services Unit. We discuss how their unit supports victims of crime and the passionate volunteers behind this challenging work. And now, settle in, grab your coffee. Here are your hosts.
Good evening, everybody. My name's Constable Danny McKinnon, and to my right is my partner in crime, Constable Jason Mikulishin. We work in the Public Information Office, and today's guests work in our Victim Services Unit, Constable Deborah Van Der Ploeg and volunteer Trish Cohen. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
We want members of the public to be aware that in our podcasts, the issues that we're talking about may pertain to violence or trauma, which could be distressing for some individuals. We ask that you please be mindful of your well-being, consider whether or not engaging with this content is appropriate for you. Thanks.
Thank you.
You bet.
So the Victim Services Unit is comprised of not only police members, but civilian members and volunteers. I understand the framework actually of the unit is volunteers. And Deb, before I get into who would access volunteer services or who you could be a support for, could you just tell us a little bit more about the framework of the unit itself?
So Victim Services with Winnipeg Police has been in effect since 1982. So since that time, we've had a number of people coming through, and currently we have a patrol sergeant. There's myself as a constable. We have a social worker, victim volunteer coordinator, and we have about 28 amazing volunteers working with us.
Once again, relying on our community to help us in the work that we do, because the work we do every day is challenging, and there's no question the work that Victim Services engages in every single day is incredibly challenging. So those volunteers are obviously very important.
And our volunteers range in age between 19 and 88.
Wow.
We actually have a volunteer, a couple of them, who have been with us for over 30 years. A lot of them have come from professional backgrounds. We have retired teachers. We have cadets that work from Winnipeg Police working with us. We have other professional people as well. We have 2 retired nurses. One is including our Trish Cohen, who's with us today.
That's amazing.
Trish, you were a nurse previously, professional nurse for 40 years.
Yes.
And you've been with the WPS Victim Services Unit for about 7?
Yeah, about 7 years now.
So something keeps bringing you back. What is it?
It does. Well, I think this is carrying on essentially on what I did before in terms of helping people, this time in a very different way. But at the same time, it is all about helping people, helping victims of crime and those associated with that. And it's still all about helping. I think that's what brings me back, and the tremendous teamwork that I see within the Winnipeg Police Service. It's a team, and it's a privilege to be part of that.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
And it's a privilege to have you here as well today, and as well as being part of the team. So thank you very much for your volunteer services. Being a helper is certainly a calling, and it comes in many different forms. And Deb, you've been a helper. You've been a police constable for over 28 years, and you're in your 5th year with Victim Services.
Yes.
What is keeping you in this role? Why do you enjoy it?
I've spent a number of years in my career, my 28 years, working with victims in different capacities. When this opportunity arose, I thought that this would be a better opportunity for me to take those skills that I've learned over the years and use them to continue to help victims in a more personal way.
Because being a victim can be a daunting experience.
It can be life-changing.
Life-altering, right?
Life-altering.
Big feelings of fear, anxiety, instability, stress can be associated with being a victim of a crime. But not only being just a victim, associated with the victim's family and witnesses. And victim services seems like a softer landing for people and a good access point for victims that are feeling vulnerable in this way. Can you please talk us through how you become involved with a victim?
So on a daily basis, when I come to work in the morning, I take a look at the arrests or any of the major events that have happened in the previous 24 hours. And from that, I identify either victims or witnesses, or in the case of victims that are minors, the family members, guardians. And then we create what's called a contact form. Those contact forms then are given to our volunteers, and they then will reach out to the victims, witnesses, or family members appropriately.
Yeah, I mean, that can be a lot of people you could be reaching out to over a 24-hour period. I can only imagine the volume of calls or contacts that you would be making.
We actually contact over 6,000 victims a year.
Wow. Yeah,
and that might be on the lower side.
Yeah.
Our volunteers actually put in upwards of 7,000 hours a year with us in their volunteerism.
Wow. So are you able to kind of walk us through how that initial contact might look, or, what type of a conversation are you having with those individuals when you initially reach out to them?
Yeah, I'm going to let Trish answer this because she's reaching out to victims on a daily basis.
She's the expert.
She's the expert.
Absolutely.
Well, usually we reach out to victims by a telephone call. We'll make numerous attempts hoping to reach them. On occasion, we do make home visits, and on occasion, we will see victims here at the station downtown as well. But generally, it is by a telephone call. And the calls are private. We don't leave messages. We just attempt to continue to reach the victim. Okay. We usually just start out by talking about what happened. And very often the victim then will open up and tell you how they're feeling about what happened. And there's a lot of expression of feelings. I think the more that a victim can talk about how they feel and how they've been affected, the more they feel heard and they feel validated, and they feel less alone. I think feeling alone after a crime is one of the hardest things for a victim. And victims can have a great degree of PTSD, such that they are very fearful of the everyday, and they may have difficulty sleeping, eating, working, relating to others. They may suffer in a lot of ways, and just being able to talk about this can be helpful. Okay. We talk about both physical and emotional injury.
Okay.
And we often are an introduction for them to Manitoba Justice. And from that, we will begin to offer them the kind of help that we can. And very often this will involve referring them or letting them know about resources that are available to them, for instance, for counseling. So we are really the initial contact.
So when you initially have contact with them, do you ever have the sense that, are they surprised to hear from you?
Very often, yes.
And
very
are
surprised.
they maybe initially, maybe they don't even realize that they need some supports.
Absolutely.
And by having this initial conversation, they come to that realization, hey, I have
maybe
been
I could
off.
use some help.
I'm not feeling quite right. And this phone call was incredibly timely, and thank goodness for it, because now you've engaged them in this obviously very positive way with respect to something that very tragic may have happened.
So
You're right.
Realistically, when a crime occurs to somebody, they tend to be in a state of shock initially.
Yes.
They need
denial,
or guilt, actually.
Sure.
For certain circumstances, and so initially they might not see themselves in a way of a victim initially. In the sense where they need some supports, but we advise them of what's available, and a lot of times, they then will call us back at a later time, and they'll say, you know what, actually, I do need something. Can you send me some information on it?
Right.
And we help them at times actually complete the applications for Manitoba Justice. They have the compensation for victims and witnesses of crime, and we will assist them in completing those applications and then submitting them on their behalf so that they can reach out and get counseling. That program also offers ambulance fees or ambulance costs, medical costs, things like broken or lost glasses. If they've had teeth damaged as a result of a crime, it will help them with that, and among other things.
So there's a lot of supports and resources that a victim may otherwise not even realize exist. And because of this initial contact, you're sharing a lot. And obviously their state of mental health in that moment is probably priority one. And then as the conversation evolves, you're acknowledging a lot of different options for them to move forward in a positive way, because it's not just in that moment. I guess it's going to take time,
ongoing.
right?
It's going to take time, and they need ongoing support as well. And with respect to your question, yes, people are often quite surprised that the police would call to see how they're doing and to provide information and to provide support. People are often very surprised and pleased that we do this. And we begin with the initial conversation on the phone, and that is followed by information that we send to them by mail. And the information, good. We talk first, or we may talk again, we may talk more than once, and then we follow that with a mail out that is specific to what happened to them.
So if a victim or survivor, sometimes we refer to, maybe they're not at that stage in the process yet. Deb, you said denial, not ready. We didn't talk about the specific incidents because there are many of them, but I think I just want to back up and say that we're talking about some pretty serious offenses that have happened, crimes against individuals. But there's definitely some staple offenses where it's 100% that they're getting reached out to, such as serious assaults, sexual assaults, homicides, personal robberies, some serious motor vehicle collisions ending in death, some fatalities. It takes people a long time to move through those processes. And what happens if somebody calls or you call and right away, they don't want anything to do with you? Like, leave me alone. I want to process this. I don't know. Do you ever receive that type of response?
We actually do. We do have some people who are not interested at the time, or they might never be interested in receiving supports. But we always let them know that we're available, and we give them our number in the event that they change their mind and want to call back at a later date. The other thing that we do notify victims or families of victims of is we are governed by the Canadian Victim Bill of Rights. Whereby if there is an arrest that's made as a result of a crime, we let them know of the arrest, the charges, and then if there's a court date, as well as any undertakings or release orders, any conditions of a court order, we advise them of that as well.
Yeah, and that is so important to close that loop
really
for a
important.
victim.
Yeah, because again, we talk about this all the time in our office, and we've talked to other officers on the job, and sometimes they have one little segment as far as involvement. And then when we talk about victims of crime, they're aware of their role in an incident, but sometimes they don't know what else has happened, or was there an end, or for them to be provided. Because I think this is a big part of what we do within the Winnipeg Police Service, and I know our role with the homicide unit, we're always very cautious. There needs to be notifications. People who are directly involved, and in this case we're talking about victims, to provide them with that information as to the outcome, I think is a part of their healing process.
Absolutely.
or kind of...
And actually, we do an initial reach out. So if somebody was a victim of a crime last week, and then it took like a second week or another month for an arrest to be made.
Are there situations where you would not contact somebody?
There are times we don't. So one of the things, a person has to be a willing complainant or victim. If somebody doesn't want any further police involvement, we will honor that request, and we won't reach out for them to them for that. And actually, under the Manitoba Justice Compensation for Victims of Crime program, one of their stipulations in order for them to provide supports is that a victim has to provide a statement, and they have to be willing to proceed with an investigation. That's their guidelines, and that comes down from the criminal code.
Just want to back up a little. So we start with the Winnipeg Police Service. They've done an investigation. An arrest may or may not have been made. It may be an ongoing investigation. there's a true victim that's been identified or a witness, and Victim Service has now done their part. You've reached out. Let's say best case scenario, they've followed up with you on your initial contact with them. And now, can you just clarify how Manitoba Justice gets involved? That part I need a little bit more help understanding. Does that mean now you're out of the picture and they take over? Is it collaborative? What is that process?
So it's collaborative to an extent. We are pre-charge and charge, and Manitoba Justice is post-charge.
Okay.
So we do provide them information on how to be a part of Manitoba Justice. Sometimes they themselves have to reach out to Manitoba Justice and agree to be part of their program. Manitoba Justice, in that case, will help them through the court process.
Okay.
There are certain types of incidents that Manitoba Justice automatically will assign themselves to. Again, that has to be post-charge. With the exception of domestic violence. Domestic violence is through and through a program through Manitoba Justice. They actually have a domestic violence unit. So that is the one type of incident that we as Winnipeg Police Victim Services do not deal with. They go straight to Manitoba Justice. Every time there is a call for service where there's a victim attached, they're automatically sent to Manitoba Justice.
You talked about counseling, ambulance fees potentially, if someone, some dental work or something like that. What kinds of compensation does that not include? Like, is just out of curiosity.
So property crime. There is no compensation for property crime if you're a victim of a break and enter or your property gets damaged in some way. That will fall into your house insurance. That is not something that Justice will cover. They don't cover stolen property as well. Or if you've lost your cell phone, they're not going to replace that. And the one piece I did leave out was Manitoba Justice does have a program for families of homicide victims, and they will assist in some funeral costs as well.
Okay, wow. That's so important.
Yeah, they actually have a pretty broad piece that they do support for. It's not always a monetary amount, but it's monetary towards certain services.
Can they reach out to you just voluntarily? And is that something that you would consider?
Yeah, we do have people that call us
yes,
a number of times.
Very often. Yeah, they do call us. We get a lot of calls, people calling for a variety of reasons. Our number is available. It's on the internet. Sometimes it's victims who would like more information on the progress of what they refer to as their case. They'd like more information, in which case we would refer them to the investigating officers. Some of them have some questions sometimes about the mail-outs that we've sent them.
Okay.
They'd like a little more information about counseling.
Right. So what number would that be, just so we get that out there too? What number would they be calling? Do
our
you have
general
that, Andy,
number?
or?
Yeah, so it's 204-986-6350. Additionally, our General Patrol members, when they hand out incident cards with the incident numbers on it, that number for Victim Services with Winnipeg Police Victim Services as well as Manitoba Justice Victim Services is on the back of those cards.
It's on the card.
And we'll put this in our show notes. If you are a victim, if you're a family member of a victim, a witness involved in a tragic incident, and you want this information, those numbers and those links will all be available at the end of the podcast. We've talked about witnesses. Why do you call witnesses?
Well,
I think I know, but can you explain for our listeners? They might be wondering, well, why does a witness need victim services?
Witnesses can deal with very traumatic incidents as well. I mean, if you are walking down the street and you see somebody being very badly assaulted, that can cause a lot of trauma for you.
But a witness is a victim in a way as well. They're a victim by what they saw, of what they heard. And they need support as well.
Oh, that's so good that you mentioned it. It's you are a victim of circumstance.
Yeah.
You were there. You've come forward, which is, a blessing and a great and brave act to do as a community member often, especially, the fear of retaliation, the fear of getting injured yourself. And so to do that, we always applaud witnesses for coming forward.
Especially if it's somebody who is actually given physical aid to a victim.
Oh, for sure.
Because then they are actually dealing with that trauma as well. And Manitoba Justice does have a piece for witnesses of crime. They offer some counseling.
When you mention that, it completely reminds me of a question that I think Danny and I get a lot from members of the media when they contact us. They often want a response from us as to there could be a violent incident that we're reporting on, and they often want a question. They want us to answer a question: is how do you think this may impact the community or witnesses or someone that was there? There could have been a violent incident of some sort, and they want a response from us as to. And the response is usually very, very simple and. To say it's obvious is, we hate to see members of the public of any age, be a witness to a violent act. Let's talk about you two and the volunteers and the officers directly involved in victim services. You're dealing with a lot of emotions. You're dealing with a lot of very tragic incidents. I'll start with you. Like, how do you manage? I know you come from a career of trauma is something that you are very used to. Not everyone is, but even though you're used to it, you still have to manage it. How do you do
absolutely.
it? How do you do it?
Absolutely. That's for certain. I think there's a variety of ways to try to manage that. I think at work and away from work, to talk it over with a colleague, talk it over with someone who does what you do and can relate to how you feel. But beyond that, to talk to people you care about or people who care about you, to express how you're feeling by what it is that you do, to express your own vulnerability. And I think to try to engage in activities that are a positive or a healthy distraction. Everybody has something that they do that they love, and to be sure that you continue to do that and to take care of yourself if you can. I think that in order to take care of other people, we also, there's no question, we have to take care of ourselves as well.
Absolutely, and recognize when we need those supports and be
to say
accepting
so.
of them.
And to say so.
Well,
I think so.
And I've been in this role for a number of years. Jay, you've been in this role for a number of years. Danny, we know firsthand experience that in policing, fire, paramedics, in the medical field, you deal with traumatic situations all the time. And so you could be you could be succumb to secondary trauma.
Yes.
So it's super important to be able to talk to somebody who you trust, somebody who loves you, somebody who understands what you're going through.
It's not always recognizable, and we've got to do those self-checks. And when you are directly involved in an incident, we want to make sure we're healthy and we're ready to get back to work.
Well, the thing is, we can't forget, and people can't forget, that people that work in these fields are human beings. And I don't think that anybody is, I don't care what role you come from, I don't think anybody is meant to see the things that people in these fields come across on a daily basis. No, really aren't.
No. EMS, I'm biased, we're biased obviously, but pretty special people. And I think we're doing so much more and so much better than we have been in the past with respect to mental health and support. So it's amazing to see what volunteers and how their role in things as well, because we rely on the community day in and day out. We're not out there doing this on our own, no question.
And like Trish said, if you don't help yourself, you can't help others. It's important to be healthy.
They say, don the oxygen mask on yourself before you can help anybody else.
Absolutely.
It's kind of an old analogy, but it's very true.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I guess volunteers, are you looking for more volunteers? Is there always a need for more volunteers? If someone were felt like they're at a point in their life, whether they're still in a career or retired or whatever the case may be, if they were interested, how would they reach out?
So on our website, we do have the numbers and the emails attached to where they can reach out to our volunteer coordinator to inquire about volunteering.
Okay.
So that's
phenomenal.
I think that's a great way to wrap it up and say that there's Trish, you've been doing this for 7 years. You're not going to do it forever, and you need to take somebody else under your wing and learn. Ditto for you, Deb. 28 years, you're rounding the bend here.
The next Deb will come into this role and do a lot of the great work you're doing now. So
there's really, we have a lot of really wonderful officers, and I don't know if the people recognize how many great people that are here doing this job who really put their heart and soul into it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you to our guests
you.
from Victim
Yes.
Services.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you
Deb
for
Van
having
Der
us.
Ploeg, Trish Cohen, my partner Jason Mikulishin.
Danny McKinnon.
Danny McKinnon, thank you. And thank you, of course, to our listeners. If you have any questions about Victim Services, how perhaps you could become a volunteer, information in the show notes. As well, if you are a victim of crime, a family member, victim of crime, or a witness of a crime, and you are in need of some supports, please refer to our show notes at the end for some extra service and support information. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to WPS After Hours. Highlights and links referenced in this episode can be found in our show notes. Please subscribe and share.